everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Quick version, it's good. It's really good. I really love it a lot. But there is going to be a lot of details we will need to discuss. So I'll give you some spoiler-free thoughts first before we get into the detailed discussion, but I can't protect you from any comment section or anything like that, so you have been warned. And I figured it would be appropriate to wear the old Chewbacca robe for this. So, where to begin? Well, I would say first impressions that this is a much better done movie, I felt, than The Force Awakens and possibly Rogue One as well. It's not a perfect movie. No Star Wars movie is. But I'll try not to avoid sounding too negative for the parts that I dislike. So, basically, to try and say my thoughts spoiler-free, this is a movie that I felt was going to go in a lot of different directions, and it didn't really end up doing that, which I like. I also feel that one of the greatest strengths of this movie is that it was a lot more distinct from the style and structure of the original trilogy. It was something that I know a lot of people had criticism of The Force Awakens for, that it was too similar to the structure of A New Hope. And while that might not have bothered me as much as it did some other people, it was enough of an observation there to perhaps lessen the overall quality and originality of it. So I'm really happy that, except for a few minor story structure points, that Last Jedi felt like its own film. And it's a very intense movie as well. Even when it feels like the film slows down, I felt I was still really invested in it, despite it being 2.5 hours long. We will see if that holds up on repeat viewings, but first impressions, I felt like I was literally on the edge of my seat, so that's a very good sign. I felt that the performances from the cast all around were very great. I really loved Luke and Kylo Ren and Rey in this movie. I just loved all the bits with them. I know one thing people were perhaps worried about is the inclusion of this new alien species called Porgs. Some might have been concerned that they were this, like, overly cute, cuddly thing done mainly for marketing purposes. And while there might have been some sort of studio mandate involved there, I do feel that they were never an annoying distraction. Some may find the humor in this film a little forced at parts, but for the most part I felt that it was in appropriate places, and even if I didn't fully laugh at a lot of the jokes, there was the occasional chuckle I got from some of them. So, for me, the humor was not out of place for the most part, so that's a good sign. I'm trying to think of what else I could say spoiler-free. There isn't really too much, I know that if you are planning to go see this movie, you probably already will. You might even be watching this if you already have. So we're just going to get straight to the spoilers to censor it. So the final non-spoiler thoughts. Initially, because this is an initial reaction video, I feel that this is stronger than The Force Awakens. And that's just mainly because, again, it felt like more of its own film. and I felt overall it was perhaps better directed. But again, this may change over time, so take my opinion for what it is right now. It's a initial reaction. And with that being said, we're going to start getting into the spoiler discussions now. So, you have been warned. This is the point of no return. So, the best way to sort of approach a spoiler type section for this film is just to simply start going through beat by beat. First of all, I really liked that the intro to this film just puts you right into the action. Movie starts and the First Order ships are closing in on the Rebel base. There's a really great action scene. We get to see Poe do some really great flying abilities with this X-Wing. This really intense scene with the Resistance bombers trying to destroy this dreadnought. All in all, it was a really great intro to the film. And then throughout this, the Resistance is trying to constantly escape from the Empire, but the First Order, you know what I mean. But they're constantly being tracked through lightspeed. They can't seem to outrun them. And so it's this very elongated chase scene. And then, while this is going on, Rey is trying to convince Luke to train her, but of course he's refusing because of his past history with Kylo Ren turning evil. And so that is the main story beat I felt that was similar to Empire Strikes Back. We have some of our characters training with an ancient Jedi Master, and we have the rest of them in a space chase, trying to outrun the big evil bad guys. But really, that's where I felt the sort of similarity stopped because of what occurred during these events. Rey starts force communicating with Kylo Ren and talking, and they start trying to understand each other. And Rey's really confused and conflicted about Luke. They have a lot of really great conversations as she's trying to understand who she really is. So I really liked all of that in those sequences. And then there's the chase going on with the Resistance escaping. And this brings me to two of the aspects that I could say maybe I would point to as my main sort of negative aspects of the film. Overall, my first impression is I do really like it, but it's more if I had to point to what I didn't like, and that would be this subplot where Finn has to go off with this one Resistance fighter named Rose, and they have to go find this master code breaker, this guy who can like hack into anything, and they're gonna get him to hack into one of the First Order ships so that they can disable the way that they're tracking them through lightspeed, and then they can quickly get away. Now, I understand sort of what they were going for with this, but for me, I just didn't really like the sort of payoff and end to this, because they go onto this planet, which I didn't really like the design for it. I'm not really sure what it was. Again, this is a first impressions review. I have to go off my gut instinct. I haven't seen the film multiple times, nor will I be able to really until it's more widely available. But there was something about this planet they went to that just, the design felt a little off for me. It felt either more like the prequels, or perhaps more like a Star Wars-like universe, maybe something like Guardians of the Galaxy. Not to say it was bad, just, again, if I have to point to something I didn't like about the film, that's the first thing I would think of. And then ultimately this whole code breaking subplot doesn't really seem to be useful because by the time they're able to get to the ship and hack into this code, it doesn't matter because the code breaker guy they get, played in a nice role by Benicio del Toro, he sells them out and leaves, so they don't disable this tracker. But then the rebels were never really planning to go into hyperspace anyways. Laura Dern's character, this admiral, who I actually really liked. I liked Laura Dern, but I didn't think I was going to like her character. She was good. Her plan was never to jump into hyperspace, really, with the resistance on board. The whole plan was to get them to escape. And I get that perhaps this secrecy was due to the fact that they didn't know how they were being tracked. She couldn't risk information getting out because perhaps they had like a first order spy on board or something. But if I recall correctly, and I may be making this mistake because again I've only seen the film once, I don't think they really ever explained how they were tracked through hyperspace. But perhaps it was that maybe there was some defector and we never saw them or something like that. The obvious setup that the movie seemed to be going through was that it was going to be Laura Dern, that she was going to be the defector, and that was the whole plan, but it wasn't, which I like. That was a good subversion of my expectations, and I think that is perhaps what's going to be most interesting about this film, is the subversion of expectations. There are a lot of ways in which many people were speculating what was going to happen with a lot of these questions, and a lot of times in this movie they're not answered in a way that you would normally expect. One of the most biggest ones, which may not be fully answered yet, but if we're going by what the film has said, that is who Rey's parents are. There's been big theories as to how she's related to Obi-Wan, to Luke, to Kylo Ren, to Mace Windu, perhaps. Like, all kinds of crazy speculation. And in the end, they are nobody, right? She's not special. She is just a regular person. And that's really an interesting choice that will probably disappoint some people who are, thinking that there was some kind of big super twist as to the secret super identity of her parents. Another thing is as to who Snoke is. He dies halfway pretty much through this movie. Kylo Ren kills him. And again, there were many big theories as to he was really Darth Plagueis, or he was Jar Jar Binks, or something like that. And now that he's dead, we may never really know. So, again, I think that the subversion of expectations is a good thing in that it's unpredictable. It's not what you were expecting. But at the same time, perhaps some will be a little disappointed that there wasn't a big, crazy answer to everything. It's a trend I've seen in films lately. I felt this way about Blade Runner 2049. This is slight spoilers right now for that movie. So if you don't want to hear Blade Runner spoilers, stop listening for this bit. And that is as to whether or not Deckard is a replicant. The new Blade Runner movie never really answers that question. In fact, it goes so far as to say that we shouldn't care what the answer is, because regardless of what Deckard was, he knows how he feels, and he feels real. And isn't that more important in the end? Okay, Blade Runner 2049 spoilers over. So, I like this subversion of expectations, but not everyone will. One thing that I think a lot of people were thinking is that perhaps Kylo Ren was going to kill Leia. And at first it looks like that happened, that he hesitated, but she ended up getting shot by other First Order fighters. And then there's this scene where she uses the Force to sort of like propel herself through space back into an airlock. And I think that's going to be a very divisive scene for a lot of people. My initial reaction to that scene is that I think the scene was happening and I sort of was like, okay, I'll take it. Like, I didn't think it was bad or horrible. I liked that Leia finally got to use more Force powers, because, we've been told since Return of the Jedi that she is the other last hope besides Luke. But, perhaps it was just the way the scene was. It just looked a little, perhaps, silly to me, just to see like an old Leia with her big robe just sort of floating through space. But again, there's been a lot of weird stuff in Star Wars movies over the years, so where do we really draw the line on that? And again, some people are probably going to look at that scene and say, well, that's just stupid. But I thought it was okay. Really, it's just the one little code breaker subplot, because the code breaking doesn't really get needed in the end anyways, and regardless of whether or not they had a code breaker, it would not have mattered, because they still would have gotten to this deserted rebel planet, and the transports would have left, and then she would have either hyperspaced away or done the suicide run into the cruises. Can we talk about that hyperspace suicide, though? Like, that is just one of the most beautifully shot space explosions I've ever seen. Every shot in that scene, I just wanted to frame it. Like, oh, the way it was framed, it was just so beautiful. Like, there are some really, really beautiful shots in this movie. You've got that scene, you've got any scene in the end when Luke is walking out along the salt flats, and the lightsaber duel, where Rey and Kylo Ren team up to fight these like super Imperial guards. Like, there's just such great framing and attention to detail, and I really, really liked it. It's definitely fantastic cinematography. That was one thing I liked, is as much as I like Return of the Jedi, there's these really cool looking red guards that we see, and they never really do anything. And I always wanted to see like what these red guards were capable of, because they were like the super elite ultimate guard. And we got to see this really awesome fight scene where Rey and Kylo Ren team up. So I really liked that sequence, just to be able to see this fighting going on. And then, of course, Kylo Ren asks Rey to sort of take him by his side, and I felt that there was a bit of a hint of perhaps the Grey Jedi mythology in there. This idea that for there to be truly balanced, there can't be any Jedi or Sith, because one will always try to put more good or evil over the other. So that was a really nice sort of philosophical element there, and I'm hoping that there will be more of that perhaps in the next one. other thing is that I may have mentioned this in the non-spoiler section, but just the intensity of this film in the second half is just so consistent. Like, at any moment, I thought that they could have ended the film and done a really big cliffhanger ending. And I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad that this film did have a proper conclusion. But that really does help maintain the intensity. Like, what you would think is the big climax, like Rey on Snoke's ship, is actually like, felt like the middle of the movie. And then you've got the big hyperspace kamikaze, and that's not the end. And then you've got the sort of classic Empire throwback, the walkers against the salt flat speeders, and that's not the end. And then you've got Luke walking out to confront all the walkers. And can I just say, like, every shot in that scene was so good. Like, I know that Rian Johnson said he was inspired by a lot of classic 50s or 60s samurai films, and it really shows in this duel between Kylo Ren and Luke. It's not a big, over-the-top, flashy duel. It's a really quick, brief fight where the intensity is in all of the little movements and sort of these two master swordsmen trying to read each other. And I really liked that. It was a lot of a different approach to a lightsaber duel. One that I felt is sort of maybe hinted at in the lightsaber duels in A New Hope or Empire, where it's not just about constant clashing, it's about a few quick hits and then a very long dramatic pause, because then it makes these hits even more intense when they do happen. So that was a really great approach to doing a lightsaber duel. And then we had Luke's death, which I didn't get emotional at when I saw it, but I have a feeling it'll be one that perhaps when I watch the scene again, I'll get more emotional then. It was such a great throwback to the classic Two Suns in the Sunset from Tatooine in A New Hope, how they redid that for this planet that Luke was on. That is a callback, a reference that was very appropriately timed, because it wasn't just there to, make the audience go, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. This was in another movie you saw that was there to symbolically show his journey being complete at that point. And then that's it. He sort of disappears as a Force ghost. So that was just such a good sequence. There's so many amazing bits in this movie. I cannot wait to watch again. Yoda also shows up as a Force ghost, and I don't know if it was a puppet or it was a CG Yoda, but just the way that he moved, it looked like it was a traditional puppet. And if they did, that would be the proper, correct way to add Yoda in this movie. And they got him sort of down as to what he was like in the original trilogy. He's very wise, but he's also kind of mischievous and sort of a bit of a prankster, and he likes messing around. So I really liked Yoda's little cameo appearance. That was very good. Very good indeed. So, again, it's hard for me to say definitive thoughts, because I'm not even sure if I have a proper opinion about The Force Awakens yet. I said this in another video I did for Mass Effect, and that is, it's hard to judge a single installment in a trilogy without having the entire knowledge of the trilogy at hand. there are many elements in Force Awakens that you can't really properly judge until you know where they go, if they do go anywhere. For example, the Rathtars scene in Force Awakens. That could have been a setup to introduce these different gangs, like the Death Squad, whatever they were called, and Concha Club. But I don't think they'll be playing a central role anymore because they aren't in The Last Jedi, and Han Solo is dead. So I don't think like that was a useful scene because it didn't really set up anything to be carried forward. But Captain Phasma's character in Force Awakens is now more important because while she might not be in The Last Jedi very much, we do finally get that payoff of her fighting Finn. And it is very important for his character to sort of rise up to his former commander and take her down, thus truly cementing him as rebel scum. So, again, now I don't have to really worry as much about Phasma having no screen time in Force Awakens because I know it's establishing her for the more important scene in The Last Jedi. We'll see how these sequences all tie together for Episode 9 when it comes out. But again, we can't really fully judge this movie, I think, until we've seen it all. So my initial reactions, again, are yes, there are things I don't like. Mainly stuff I would say in the second quarter or so. The first quarter is really good. Second quarter dips down a little bit. But then for the whole last half, it was virtually flawless for me. Just the way this kept up the intensity and this sense of desperation throughout. I just really, really enjoyed that. And the way, again, it wasn't really structured like a traditional Star Wars movie in the sense that is very welcome to see, because I always felt that a Star Wars movie now does not really need to play it safe because it's going to make a bajillion, trillion, million, jillion dollars on name alone. So now would be the time to get a little experimental and start switching it up a little bit and doing some weird things. And I feel that they did that with this movie, and it is very welcome. Again, not entirely perfect. Already have some criticisms, and we'll just have to sort of take them for what they are. But overall, I did leave feeling very satisfied, and the good easily outweighs the bad for me. And perhaps with repeat viewings it won't bother me as much. Again, it's just more I'm trying to make sure I don't just overpraise this. Right? So like, okay, well, there are some things that are not perfect. We have to accept that. But I can easily say, first impressions, I liked it more than The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, I felt I had to accept a few things, like, okay, well, it's good, but this, I'll just have to accept it. Whereas, Last Jedi, I was just like, no, I really loved that. And then, I think that's about all I have to say for it. I mean, I'm sure I'll have some more thoughts eventually that'll come to mind. Again, this is a very unscripted first impressions review. Can you really, truly understand a layered film after only one viewing? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I'm pretty sure Empire Strikes Back wasn't my favorite Star Wars movie when I first saw it, but it is now. It got better after repeated viewings, and I'm hoping The Last Jedi will do that. But overall, this was a great entry into the franchise. I'm really glad with what they did I'm excited to see where this is going to go. I don't really do scores or anything like that, so overall this gets my recommended seal of approval. It's a really great Star Wars movie, and I'm hoping that this trend will continue into the future. I'm glad to see that they're finally starting to branch off a little more into uncharted territory. And if there is anything I missed mentioning about, feel free to ask me. I'll try to get around to describing my thoughts a little more in the near future. But with all that said and done, that's all I have to say. Hopefully you enjoy the movie too. If you don't, there's nothing I can do about that, but to each his own. In any case, those are my thoughts. Have a good night.